Hello, my name is Christopher Jackson. I have been researching the history of fraud, specifically the role of auditors in detecting fraud. The main question I've been concerned with, however, is should auditors be held liable for missing fraud in their audits of the financial statements of publicly held companies? You could hypothesize that fraud has been around as long as there has been commerce, and you'd most likely be right. The first recorded case of fraud was way back in 300 BC, when a Greek sea merchant, Hegestratos, borrowed money on the basis of paying it back with interest once he arrived at his destination with his cargo, which in this case was corn. Instead, Hegestratos hatched a plan to sink his ship, sell the corn, and keep his loan. His plan failed as he was caught in the act, and during his attempt to flee, was chased off the ship where he ended up drowning. In the early 20th century, a man named Charles Ponzi made famous a fairly new type of fraud, which is now known by his namesake as a Ponzi scheme. Ponzi promised his clients profits by buying discounted postal reply coupons in other countries, then redeeming them in the United States at face value. In reality, what he was doing, and what the scheme is known for, was paying early investors with the money he received from later investors. Ponzi was not the inventor of this scheme, but its use became so well known by him that the term Ponzi scheme has been in use ever since. In more recent times, a man named Bernie Madoff pulled off the largest Ponzi scheme in history. His arrest in 2008 led to the revelation of the fraud he had committed, which amounted to an estimated $64.8 billion. Now that we know a little bit about the history of fraud occurrences, I'm going to take a look into the history of auditors' roles in finding fraud. In 1997, the Statement on Auditing Standards number 82 was issued to clarify auditors' responsibilities in detecting material misstatements in financial statements. SAS number 82 did a couple things. First, it described the auditor's responsibilities relating to fraud in a financial statement audit. Second, it provided guidance on what auditors should do to meet those responsibilities. The Enron scandal in the early 21st century caused sweeping reforms of business financial practices. Most important of these changes was the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002. The act allowed for more transparency in financial reporting, corporate accountability, and greater independence of auditors. In 2015, the audit company Ernst & Young was actually found liable for the losses of an investment firm from the collapse of Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme. The jury found that the auditors were negligent in its work for funds funneled to Madoff. Now, let's take a look at some solutions on whether or not auditors should be held liable for missing fraud. I believe there are three possible solutions. First, auditors could be held completely liable for missing fraud. That is a rather unrealistic option, however, because there are too many variables involved. Companies wouldn't be able to hire any auditors if they were going to be held liable for missing any fraud, whether it be financial statement fraud or asset misappropriation. Second possible solution would be to hold auditors liable for missing fraud, but only to a certain extent. This seems like a more reasonable option, but it would be rife with problems. There would need to be exact parameters laid out as to which cases of missed fraud would cause auditors to be held liable. The third option, and the option that I'm bringing, is that auditors should not be held liable for missing fraud on their audits of financial statements for publicly held companies. The key word there is missing. They should not be held liable for missing fraud. If it is proven that the auditor intentionally falsified their opinion, stating that there is no fraud when there is, then that is a different story altogether. Auditors who perform their duties honestly and in good faith should not be held liable for missing fraud. Thank you very much for your time.